Good morning, it's Jim Vanderwall with the Fraser Basin Council. Thanks everyone who's joined us so far for our webinar today on drought response in the Okanagan Valley. We will give people just a couple of minutes who are still joining us, but we'll get started in 2 minutes or so. As you can see on your screen, hopefully, there are a couple of ways you can join us in terms of the audio portion of this webinar. There's a phone number as well as computer audio. And if you're having any technical issues, feel free to use the question box to get in touch with my colleague, Elena Chia, or send an email to fraserbasin@gmail.com. So just hold on for a couple of minutes here and we'll get started very shortly. Good morning. My name is Jim Vanderwall. I'm with the Fraser Basin Council, and I'm pleased to start our webinar today. Our topic is on drought response in the Okanagan Valley and lessons learned. So we're pleased to be able to share these examples with other communities around BC. This is part of our BC Regional Adaptation Collaborative series, which some of you may have participated in the past. Some of the other tools that are available as part of BC Regional Adaptation include the retooling.ca website, where you can access different resources and tools related to climate adaptation and risk. And our goal is to try and support local governments and First Nations and businesses that are looking at future climate risk and trying to build it into their plans and decisions. As well, we do from time to time host in-person events in addition to these webinars. So if you join our email list, I'd be happy to let you know about those as they come up in your area. Our activities are supported under this program by Natural Resources Canada, as well as the BC Ministry of Environment, Climate Action Secretariat. As I mentioned earlier, just some logistics. We will be keeping the audio of all the participants muted just because there are a number of people on the line today, and that allows you to hear the speakers clearly. We encourage you to ask questions, though there's a question box function in your control panel, so you can ask questions at any time by typing them. We'll get to those questions at the end of the webinar and our speakers will respond to those. You can also use that question box if you've got any technical issues, you're not able to hear us or whatever. Also you can send a message to my colleague Elena Chia, who's assisting with the webinar today, at fraserbasin@gmail.com, and she will help you out. So we've got two great speakers today to talk about their experiences in dealing with drought management in the Okanagan. Kellie Garcia, who's with the Okanagan Basin Water Board and is a policy and planning specialist. Kellie has 13 years of experience in environmental sustainability planning and water resource management, and at Okanagan Basin Water Board, she works to facilitate consistent approaches to water sustainability by bringing people together to share knowledge and experiences, identifying and promoting best practices, and looking at ways to integrate and streamline planning strategies and policy tools. With her is Jennifer Miles, who's with Greater Vernon Water and is the Water Sustainability Coordinator. And the goal of her work is to improve water use efficiency and protect watersheds that supply water to the communities of Vernon, Coldstream, and surrounding rural areas. And in particular, Jennifer encourages residents and businesses to create landscapes adapted to the Okanagan climate, requiring little or no supplemental irrigation, while also supporting ecosystem functions and wildlife habitat. And Jennifer's lived in Vernon for 9 years, moving to the area following completion of her master's degree in environmental design from the University of Calgary. So before I hand things over to our two speakers, I am just going to launch a poll and to get an idea of, first of all, how you found out about this webinar. So if you could let us know, that's helpful for us in planning future events. Okay, you can see here the results of the poll. So most people found out from our e-news, and the second most common source of information was a colleague. So that's great. Thanks very much. Just one other poll before we start, which is we're interested in what type of organization you're with. If you don't mind letting us know, that also helps our speakers to tailor their presentation to those who are on the line today. Great, thanks very much. So we've got quite a few people on this webinar who are with provincial or federal government, followed by local governments or First Nations. That's, I guess, the two most common categories here. So that's also very helpful for us to know. Thank you. Thank you very much. So at this point, just bear with us for a moment, as I will pass over the baton to Kellie and Jennifer so they can begin their presentation.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Fraser Basin Council for inviting us to speak today, and to all of you for attending. Today, we're here to share our experiences with drought planning and response in the Okanagan through two different lenses: a valley-wide water management organization and a local water supplier. First, we'll introduce you to our organizations and describe the beautiful valley we live and work in. Next, we'll talk about the 2015 drought and what we learned from it. And lastly, we'll tell you what we've been working on since to improve our drought resilience. So I work for the Okanagan Basin Water Board, or OBWB. We were initiated in 1968 and legislated in 1970 as a valley-wide partnership to identify and resolve critical water issues in the Okanagan watershed. Our board of directors includes reps from the 3 Okanagan regional districts, the Okanagan Nation Alliance, the Water Supply Association of BC, and the Okanagan Water Stewardship Council, which is a multi-stakeholder group established by our board to provide independent science-based advice on water issues. Our programs are supported through tax assessments on lands within the Okanagan watershed. So the Okanagan is a long, narrow mountain valley in the southern interior of BC. A string of deep blue lakes run down the center of the valley, north to south, and for 200 kilometers. Running east to west and feeding the lakes are many small drainages you can see on the map here. They're fed by snow and small mountain reservoirs. So these drainages connect with each other through the main stem lakes. So it's truly one valley and one water here in the Okanagan. And Greater Vernon Water is up there in the north of the valley.
Yes, thanks, Kellie. This is Jennifer Miles, and just to provide some context for where the water utility I work for is, we are at that top end of the Okanagan Basin. We include the Vernon community, Coldstream community, as well as portions of several electoral areas within the regional district of North Okanagan. And we basically cover 55,000 customers in those municipalities and electoral areas, but we also have a large agricultural land base. And 55% of our annual water demand goes to agriculture.
So the Okanagan is famous for its big lakes, sunny climate, and fabulous orchards and wineries. And you can see from this photo, the contrast between the irrigated crops in the valley and the stark and rugged landscape is both startling and beautiful. So it brings people to the valley. Our big lakes, though, contribute to a myth of water abundance in the valley. The truth is the Okanagan is one of the most water-stressed regions in Canada. At its deepest point off Kelowna, Okanagan Lake, which you can see here in the picture, is 232 meters deep, and at 135 kilometers long, with 340 square kilometers of surface area, it holds a lot of water. But looks are deceiving. Our lakes are natural lakes, and we are limited to using only what is replenished by snow and rain, or we'll begin to draw them down too much. On Okanagan Lake, we only have about a meter of operating range, which means rather than having a 232 meter deep reservoir, we only have a 1 meter deep reservoir. The hot, dry climate also results in very high evaporation and evapotranspiration rates in the valley, leaving even less water to use. Almost a meter of the inflows to Okanagan Lake evaporates off the surface, rises and goes east to rain on the inland rainforest near Kootenay Lake. Balancing the often competing water requirements of the environment, humans, irrigation, tourism, recreation, industry, and cultural values is becoming increasingly difficult in the Okanagan. We've got currently 325,000 residents, but the population grows and shrinks depending on whether it's ski season, boating season, or wine festival season. We expect to grow steadily for the foreseeable future because this is one of the best places to live in Canada. In the Okanagan, 85% of our water is used outside for irrigation during the hottest and driest time of the year. Right now, we deliver about 60% of our water from reservoirs in the mountain, most of this going to agriculture, 20% from the main valley lakes, which mostly goes to urban areas, and 20% from groundwater. There are about 20 water suppliers with more than 500 connections and around 100 water suppliers with less than 500 connections. So it's a very complicated water supply setup here in the Okanagan Valley. The hydrology of the valley is dominated by the accumulation of snow in the winter, which slowly melts through the spring and early summer. Heavy rainfall can also make some contribution, but basically we rely on the snow to fill the lake each year, and also to fill the high elevation lakes and reservoirs that supply most of the water for agriculture on the hillsides and the benches surrounding the lakes. We'll come back to this, this snow pillow graph on the left shows 2015. And we'll come back to this later in the presentation to talk about the snowpack situation in 2015. So this is a hydrograph of Mission Creek, and obviously correlates closely to the snow pillow graph I just showed you. So because most of our water comes in the spring and not when we need it most in the summer and early fall, the Okanagan is a highly managed system. Every drop that falls in the valley is controlled at some point in its journey back to the Pacific. We are literally in a situation where we can have the same overall precip as a normal year, but depending on the amount of snow and the timing of the melt, and depending on whether we have summer rains, we can have summer water shortages. So we're highly, highly dependent on the snowpack and being able to manage that water through the summer and fall. And one of the biggest natural challenges we face is we never know how much water we're going to get from year to year, just naturally. The Okanagan's natural variability is as much a characteristic as its dryness. So as a result, we have to plan for everything. So the degree to which citizens experience problems related to climate change depends on the interplay of many factors. You know, how much snow will we get? When will it melt? Will we have to spill the lakes early to avoid flood? Will we have too much water or not enough? Climate change is expected to change stream flow patterns in the Okanagan, bringing more runoff in the winter and less in the spring, an earlier freshet, and lower summer flows with a longer duration. We are already seeing these patterns play out in the Okanagan, and you'll see that later in the presentation. Climate change is also expected to bring increased temperatures in the Okanagan, and the magnitude, frequency, and intensity of extreme events for both temperature and rainfall are also forecasted to increase as climate change. So we're looking at more droughts and floods to deal with in the future. So now that you have a good understanding of the water characteristics of the valley, let's talk about the 2015 drought. So to set the stage, here's a description of the provincial drought levels. Many of you on the call are probably very familiar with these. So drought levels are called based on stream flows and precipitation, among other indicators. So in the spring of 2015, it was obvious that something very weird was going on with the weather. We'd had a monster snowstorm in January, which brought us up to an average snowpack, as you saw in the earlier snow pillow graph, but not much extra. We didn't get much extra after that. Then we had a very, very early melt. So one of the water suppliers started catching runoff in his reservoir by early February. The Okanagan lake level rose quickly, and as June usually is one of our biggest precipitation months, dam operator in Penticton began releasing water to allow capacity for catching the June rains without causing flooding. But the June rains didn't come this year. The province called a level 2 drought for the Okanagan in mid-May, then moved us to a level 3 on July 9th and to a level 4 by August 5th. So this is what BC looked like on August 20th in 2015. The entire southern part of the province was in either a level 3 or level 4 drought. And looking even further south, the state of Washington had also had a big early drought declaration in April. So now Jennifer is going to tell you about our drought response from her perspective first, and then I will put things into the valley-wide context.
Thanks, Kelly. So from the Greater Vernon Water Utility perspective, we were monitoring the climate forecast and we're concerned that we saw an early warming trend in 2015 that was affecting our snowpack from March to May. And it's usually expected that we take that snowpack and use that to fill our reservoir, and we look for our reservoir to spill. We usually hope for that to ensure that we have the maximum volume. But in 2015, this all happened a bit too early. This graph illustrates our reservoir volume levels. The lines, green, purple, and red, are different levels that we recorded different years. Purple being 2015, green was our maximum reservoir fill year, and red was our minimum year. The blue, green, yellow, orange, and red bands represent the reservoir levels that we use to trigger different drought stages, whether we are normal, stage 1, 2, 3, or 4. When we went into 2015, we were well above our normal reservoir levels, and we certainly felt that that is normally a good position to be in. But seeing that peak occur in late March, early April was basically a month early for our system. And as you can see at the top, that star is the normal point where we should be peaking. In our max year, we had an early peak, but that peak held on through to almost August. And unfortunately, in 2015, we didn't see that occur as there wasn't the June rain that we had hoped for. So our drought management plan was triggered. We use what we call a decision tree to work through all of the factors that could trigger a water supply shortage for our customers. We look at our upland reservoirs starting at the far left side of this graphic. We then look at our snowpack levels, our weather forecast and snow pillow information from the BC River Forecast Center. Then we look at our customer water demands, primarily our irrigation water demands, as that drives the majority of our water consumption during our peak use period of the summer. And at the far right of that graphic, we determine what stage we are in terms of our drought management plan response. So in 2015, we started off looking at normal storage levels, well above normal, but our snowpack went down to below average, as circled in red. The River Forecast Center's weather forecast was unfavorable. We were going into a high irrigation demand season, so we moved from normal to stage 1 in early July 2015. So the goal of stage 1 is to have a voluntary 10% demand drop from our customers. There's no real change to our water restrictions in terms of the amount of time people can irrigate. As with many water utilities, we have a 3-day-a-week watering schedule that's in effect year-round. A customer with an even address or an odd address is given 3 days per week that they can choose to water on. So moving from normal to stage 1, they still have the option to do any of those 3 days for watering, or all of them. But it was great to see that we had customers respond to that voluntary request to conserve. The key focus from the drought management plan is on the utility when we moved from normal to stage 1. We want to increase our frequency of communication. So we were looking at updating the water supply status in the media, and looking at how we were going to, looking at our forecast for future water demand from our customers, and how to warn them if we feel that we needed to move to the next stage, stage 2. Our communications also focused on promoting best management practices. So watering once a week for most lawns is all you need. Watering only an inch of water, watering at night, all of those good messages. And basically, we were encouraging customers to conserve now to avoid stage 2. This is one of our communication tools. It's also used for customer enforcement. If a resident or a business is found to be watering or using irrigation in contravention of the water restrictions bylaw, we will pay them a visit and provide this education piece to help them understand what the restrictions are, and gives a bit more detail. We tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. I'll just move forward to zoom in a little bit on it. We tried to make it engaging for customers, so we used graphics to illustrate the different water use activities that our restrictions regulate. And then we also wanted to make sure that we were clear on what the schedule is for watering, and to illustrate where we go as we move into higher level of restrictions, how water use is limited going into stage 2, 3, and 4, just to increase awareness of the impact that we would have going into a more severe drought. And we also see this as an opportunity to educate customers on other aspects of our water system, such as cross-contamination, and encouraging awareness of alternatives to lawns, such as air escaping. And we go through our enforcement process, and the first visit to a customer who's found to be in contravention of the restrictions is an education visit. Then we'd send a warning letter, and the third strike is a fine. So in addition to our sort of broad customer communications, we were doing one-on-one meetings with our large water customers, primarily agricultural large holdings. And we had to work on understanding their consumption patterns, because sometimes infrastructure is more of a limitation in a drought situation than the actual water use or the hydrological conditions. For Greater Vernon Water, we have a lag time between when we can bring water down from our reservoirs into our distribution system. So when demand is low and we've already started the process to bring down water from the reservoirs, that water has to be wasted and moved into the creek system. Of course, it's not really wasted, going on into the watershed, but it's now lost from our storage to help move us through later in the year. So we asked our large water customers if they could contact our staff directly just before they were planning to irrigate so that we would know when to supply them with that water. We also engaged with our Drought Stakeholder Working Group, and this was a group of residents, businesses, interested industries who were all involved in dealing with water issues and were particularly impacted during water shortages. This allowed for more in-depth consultation because we, of course, would have open houses and broad website engagement for the wider community when we were working on updating our drought management plan in 2011, but those venues were very poorly attended. But with our Drought Stakeholder Working Group, we had a commitment from a broad cross-section of the community. And when those people attended our meetings, they felt that their input was valued and was having a real impact into the drought management planning process. So it really encouraged a higher level of commitment and interest, and it really helped us create a better product through our drought management plan. So as you can see through this slide, we had commercial representatives from various high water use industries such as beverage production. We had the hospitality industry represented, as well as public institutions and the school district, pool industries, irrigation, landscaping, fruit growers, of course, and then government representation. So this graph illustrates our water use during 2015, shown as the red line, versus 2014's water flows into our distribution system. So through the year, you can see the red line had a significant peak early in April compared to the blue 2014 line. And that illustrates that hot, warm spring that we've been talking about that was really driving water demand. So in early July, we declared stage 1 at Greater Vernon Water. And within the next week, we saw a very significant drop in customer demand. And on average, we saw a 21% drop between July 10th and August 12th from the pre-stage 1 customer demand. And overall, for the month of August, we saw an 8% drop compared to 2014. But we can't rely on just one metric when we're monitoring how our customers are responding to water demand. We also have to think about other factors that might be impacting their water use. So this graph has both our water flows into our distribution as the dark blue line, but also precipitation received in the region, illustrated by the bars coming up from the bottom. So you'll see in mid-July, we had a pretty significant rain event, which was followed by a significant demand drop. But in general, the peaks through most of August are lower and are on a general downward trend. So it's hoped that awareness of the drought was also a factor in addition to the rain. So in terms of customer awareness of the drought, it certainly was beneficial to have a high level of awareness in the media, with the province declaring level 3 and level 4 droughts for the region. Everyone was very well aware that there were extremely low stream levels throughout BC. But Greater Vernon Water was not experiencing the drought in quite the same way because we are backed up by large reservoirs with storage. And that was for many other Okanagan water utilities. So this led to a bit of confusion about how local water suppliers should respond to the provincial drought declarations. And the utility felt political pressure to go beyond stage 1 based on the province being at level 4. And also the public felt that we should be doing our most best to avoid water supply shortages. But by activating our drought management plan, we did see that it wasn't necessary to move beyond those levels, and actually going to a higher stage restrictions negatively impact the environment by restricting the amount of water going downstream into our lower watershed. So staff recommended staying at stage 1, and with the guidance of our drought management plan and decision tree, it helped provide us with the evidence to present that information to the decision makers.
Okay, so now I'll give you the valley-wide perspective of the response to the 2015 drought. So even though we didn't get the June rains, we were still pretty taken by surprise when the province declared a level 3 drought in early July. So our executive director, Dr. Anna Warwick-Sears, was given an advance notice by the regional water manager out of Kamloops and asked the OBWB to be a communication channel out to the water suppliers and the public. And this is when things started to get really hectic around our office. You know, although we work with all the local governments on water science and planning, we really didn't have the kind of contact list you'd want for a valley-wide emergency response plan. So we worked together with the local governments, Interior Health, and the Water Supply Association to ramp up our outreach and shared information through emails, a webinar, and then a workshop in early August at the peak of the drought. But basically, all the water suppliers wanted to understand what the other water suppliers were doing and what their situation was, and then help deciding how they should be responding to this provincial drought declaration. So the email updates that we sent out brought together information from a variety of sources that was otherwise not available in one place. We shared information on stream and weather conditions, conservation measures, river temperatures for salmon migration, and the unfolding regulatory process. We also communicated to the public through press releases and other outreach under our Make Water Work campaign, which Jennifer will talk a bit more about later. So we faced many challenges during the 2015 drought that showed us we had more work to do to prepare for drought in the Okanagan. Like I mentioned, we didn't have the systems in place to easily gather and distribute information about our drought situation to the right people at the right time. All but one of our major suppliers did have watering restriction bylaws, but stage 2 in Armstrong meant something different from stage 2 in Greater Vernon Water or in Penticton. They varied as to the number of days of the week you were allowed to water, whether they allowed sprinkling or hand watering only. Some had 4 stages and some had 5. So there was also a lot of confusion about how the provincial drought levels related to local conditions, and Jen alluded to that earlier. So most of our reservoirs were fine, but as the drought levels were being published alongside the utility-specific watering restriction stages, the public and elected officials were pushing back on local water suppliers, wanting clarification. Many water suppliers didn't have robust drought plans in place, like Greater Vernon Water, so they found it hard to justify moving between stages or staying put. So now let's talk about what we've been working on to improve things in the Okanagan. So in April of 2015, not yet knowing it was going to be a drought year, the OBWB had commissioned a study to see where the Okanagan was at with our drought plans and policies and where we could improve. The study showed, and the 2015 drought that was happening during the study, showed that we needed to write more drought plans and work together better to share our resources and knowledge. We also needed to communicate more often and more efficiently. So Dr. Sears hired me to increase the OBWB's capacity to support local water suppliers with efforts to improve their drought resilience. The first thing I did was look at the OBWB's 2015 response, take a look at its weaknesses and strengths, and then write a formal response plan to use in the future. Most of the actions in the strategy focus on communication and coordination activities that will contribute to a more consistent valley-wide approach to drought response, because that's the mandate of the Okanagan Basin Water Board. The strategy is only going to be implemented when there is a provincial or sub-basin drought declaration. It's not intended to be used to declare drought or to determine what level of drought is in effect. That's up to the province and to the local water suppliers. We act more as a conduit for communications and coordination during a drought. And in my opinion, the best thing to come out of the drought is that there is now a big movement in the valley to follow the lead of Greater Vernon Water with a greater level of planning and a much clearer set of decision points for moving through the stages. So the OBWB has been helping water suppliers by bringing them together to share knowledge and experiences. And we prepared and distributed templates and other resources and provided funding for drought management plans. Another project we're working on is the Main Stem Lakes Drought Triggers Project. So the connection between lake management practices and local drought responses has been a long-standing question. Unlike water suppliers with upland storage reservoirs, great suppliers on main stem lakes do not control the level of their reservoirs. The province does. Regulation of the Okanagan main stem lakes and the Okanagan River began in the early 1900s and now includes dams or control structures on each of the lakes. So over the last 7 months, Dr. Sears and I have been working with the technical team and water suppliers to prepare drought trigger guidelines for the Okanagan main stem systems. So these triggers would be able to be incorporated into local drought plans so that water suppliers on the main stem will have consistent, rational, and a coordinated process for moving between their watering restriction stages, like Jennifer showed you earlier with her decision tree and her trigger graph. We need something like that to be available to the utilities on the main stem lakes. The other project that we're working on is to help improve communications between water suppliers and their agricultural customers. The project is funded through the BC Agriculture and Food Climate Action Initiative and the OBWB. So it was initiated because of feedback received during a series of workshops hosted by the Climate Action Initiative that brought together agriculture producers and government partners to evaluate climate change impacts on local production and develop actions to address the associated challenges. So agricultural representatives indicated that many producers were not aware of changes in the status of regional drought levels in 2015, and it made it more difficult for them to prepare and respond. They emphasized the need for reliable information that is based on the state of their local water supply so they can make appropriate water management decisions. So we're working with Greater Vernon Water and the City of Penticton to pilot some outreach approaches this growing season. It's a very collaborative project with representatives from the producers, agricultural industry, and government and the water supply industry working together to improve communication, not just during drought, but all year round. So focusing on water supply, but of course, even more crucial during a drought time. So it's been extremely important to have an excellent working relationship with the water folks in Thompson Okanagan region of FLNRO and also those in Victoria. We had a very lively and active communication through the drought in 2015, and we were given the opportunity in 2016 to provide feedback to the regional drought plan, which I thought was really great. The staff at the OBWB were given a draft of the plan, provided feedback, they incorporated that feedback, and then we also had a workshop with water suppliers and provincial reps, and the plan was presented at that workshop, and even more feedback was given. So it was a great back and forth process. So it really has to be a working partnership, and we are looking forward to continuing our dialogue with the province.
So in terms of what the Greater Vernon Water Utility learned from 2015, we are looking to update our drought management plan, which was updated previously in 2011. We want to refine our drought stage triggers, which were used to create our decision tree. And the main update is to include our Kalamalka Lake water source, as Kellie mentioned, being one of the main stem lakes. And aside from needing to have better science to understand what levels trigger what stage of drought, previously Greater Vernon Water didn't have the infrastructure capacity to maximize our Kalamalka Lake water use. So it wasn't really ever a concern of using too much water to impact downstream flows out of Kalamalka Lake because of those infrastructure limitations. But through the 2011 drought management plan and our master water plan process, we have improved our infrastructure interconnections through our distribution system and pressure monitoring to allow for better usage of the Kalamalka Lake water source. We also wanted to have better science included in our drought management plan regarding environmental flow needs management. We've been working with the province as well as the consultant to develop a better data set for guiding our flows out of primarily our Dudo Creek watershed. And it's really been a great help for our operations staff to be able to look at weekly adjustments instead of the monthly flow levels that had been used previously. We also wanted to include more reference to climate change factors, because we are already seeing the impact of an early agricultural water demand season. Normally we expect agricultural water use to begin starting in April, but with early spring melts and early warm temperatures, we're looking at an extension of that agricultural water use season, which may impact how much storage we have for the full year. We were also very excited to be able to work with the Okanagan Basin Water Board to bring together other water utilities and help provide more of a consistent message on drought to residents throughout the valley, because of course everyone is very mobile, living in one community and working in another. So it's nice to be able to use the same terminology for restriction stages with generally the same ideas of what is restricted in each of those stages. So one of the tools that we looked at building through a grant from the Okanagan Basin Water Board was this graphic to illustrate our water supply stage and what are the related water use restrictions for outdoor lawn sprinkling. So this graphic moves through from our normal year-round stage to 1, 2, 3, and 4, our emergency level, where we would have no outdoor water use. Fingers crossed, we never have to use this one. Other elements that we look to help avoid drought is several different programs that comprise our water conservation program at Greater Vernon Water. We have a tiered consumption rate that requires that customers are charged for their water consumption based on 3 separate tiers, with our top tier of consumption over 80 cubic meters charged at, from our previous bylaw, $2.46. And that was for residential customers. Agricultural customers have a flat rate for their allocation. They're set to amount expected water demand for the year, but customers can use more, but they will be charged a volumetric rate for any water use above that allocation. So these consumption rates have been gradually increasing over the past several years, since about 2010. We're also completing internal water system audits to help find leaks and address internal pressure management within our water system to avoid losing water. We also have determined that water bypasses and theft of water could be a significant loss of water in our system. We're also trying to better understand our water demand patterns. As I mentioned before, it can often be lost, and we're doing that by implementing automated meter reading technology so that we get even the water use information for customers, them find leaks in homes. And lastly, we're looking at continuing our water-wide landscaping programs to help discourage what I like to call restrictions shock, when people will have to deal with losing their landscaping in times of drought. So one way we do that is through the Make Water Work program, which is led by the Okanagan Basin Water Board through Corinne Jackson, the communications director. And it's an excellent program to be able to participate in, because again, it provides that consistent message up and down the Okanagan Valley that people have sort of filtering into their subconsciousness to learn how to be wise with their water use. Because we're still fighting a bit of an uphill battle with our love affair with lawns. And unfortunately, many people still get very frustrated at the idea of water use restrictions because they have put a lot of time and effort into maintaining their landscaping. And we acknowledge that that's an important piece of living in the Okanagan. We all want to have a beautiful landscape to live in. So we try to help customers understand that you can drought-proof your yard and have an aesthetically pleasing landscape. So we have demonstration gardens. We provide information on how to xeriscape, workshops, and encouragement for people to investigate native and low water demand plants, which is also tied into the Make Water Work program through their plant palette.
Okay, great. So to bring home the key points of our presentation, these are what we think are the most important things to become drought resilient in your communities. You need to work together. Everything is getting more expensive, more sensitive, and more critical. So no one level of government, agency, organization can do a good job and cover expenses going alone. You need to talk to each other. One of the main challenges we had with the 2015 drought was that we didn't have good systems in place for the province to talk to the purveyors or the purveyors to talk to residents and industry. So we need to continue to work on this and become better at communicating. You need to plan in advance. Make your plans when it's raining. Make your drought plans when it's raining. So make sure you have robust drought management plans in place. Drought plans should be like emergency response plans, clear, simple, and direct, so that users and purveyors understand their roles and the role of the province.
We also really feel that it's so important to understand both your water supply that you're able to source from your watersheds, as well as your customer demands. We really found that we were able to understand where to put our time and resources in managing the 2015 drought by understanding where our supply shortages were. They weren't the entire GVW system. Really, we had one water source that was critically short, and we focused in on dealing with the customers who were on that source, and they were happy to have the assistance in understanding how to extend their supply to make it through the season. And again, to be able to understand that, you need to monitor. And having universal metering in our system is really critical to being able to assess our customer demand patterns, but we're not quite there yet. And we're very excited to be looking at moving onwards to the automated meter reading so that we can get more frequent demand or meter readings from our meters. And of course, we want to help to instill that water conservation ethic year-round to avoid dealing with the negative impacts of drought. We understand that there is a significant loss in cost to people who have invested in their landscapes. Even on an institutional level, we have parks and trees, and it's very costly to replant for the municipalities when we're in times of drought. So looking for ways that we can conserve water for those high value infrastructure pieces by looking at xeriscape landscaping in other areas can be really beneficial. And lastly, we really feel the importance of practicing adaptive management, planning, monitoring, evaluating, and then going back and revisiting the plan. We hope to look at our drought management plan on a 5-year cycle and always be looking at ways that we can update it to better meet the needs of our customers.
And thank you very much for listening today. We're done.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer and Kelly. Great presentation, and I'm sure we'll have lots of questions from participants today. So as I mentioned before, if you got a question, just type it into the question box, and we'll go through those with our speakers. So we've already got a few already. So first question we've got here from Jane is, do you monitor the aquifer east of Okanagan Falls on the East Bench? Very specific question.
Yes, I was just going to say, this is Jennifer. Probably the regional district of Okanagan-Similkameen, if they have any water sources in that aquifer, they would be monitoring it. But I'm unfortunately, being in the north, I'm not aware of that.
Mm-hmm. And the Okanagan Basin Water Board doesn't usually do that type of location-specific monitoring. So, like Jen mentioned, it would either be the regional district or the province may also have monitoring wells. But I'm not familiar with that area enough to tell you.
That being said, the Okanagan Basin Water Board has a water supply and demand program where they are encouraging all utilities and water users in the valley to report their water use, and trying to create a database of water use in the valley.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another question here from were Okanagan Nation Alliance or any of the individual First Nations involved in the drought planning and response discussions, decisions, or outreach processes?
Yes, definitely they were. The fisheries department especially. So they've been involved, they were involved in all of the calls that we put together and the emails that Anna compiled. And they also are participating in the Main Stem Drought Triggers project. We've got a fisheries person from ONA participating on that. We try to involve them as much as they're able to be involved and interested in being involved.
Great, thanks very much. Question from Susanna. Thanks for the presentation. Given that droughts become more frequent and severe, what other adaptive measures will you put in place, e.g. rain harvesting, grey water systems, etc.?
Well, from the utility perspective, we certainly are aware that there's those options out there, but they're a bit beyond our mandate. We keep them sort of in the back of our minds. For example, in Vernon, we're lucky to have a reclaimed water system where the city of Vernon treats the sewage to a very high standard and then is using it for irrigation on some pasture lands and golf courses. So always in the back of our minds is that that might be a resource we could look to in the future. But in terms of us being a water supplier, we really encourage our customers to be as efficient with their water use as possible and to minimize their water use so that we don't need to build more supply.
Great, thanks very much. Harshan has a question as well. Do you have any kind of design guidance or water conservation outreach document that you may have used in the past that was provided to water users or builders, developers that could be shared with others that might be also developing drought outreach programs?
We have lots of resources on our OBWB.ca website and also through the Make Water Work website. So I can't think of a specific document because we do have quite a few, but those would be the two websites from our perspective that you could go to take a look.
Yes, makewaterwork.ca has sort of broad categories of residential, commercial kind of tips for water conservation. And but in terms of like building code type recommendations, we haven't delved into that because there's the building code.
And feel free to send either one of us an email with information requests, and we can track down what we can for you.
Great. Yeah, we appreciate you doing that. So the emails are up on the screen here if you'd like to follow up. Harshan is with APEG BC, so you can see where that question is coming from. Question from Jan is, what are your drought predictions for the summer of 2017?
It's pretty early in the year, but we are looking at pretty average snowpack, but then we just received quite a bit of snow last week. We started the year, we went into the fall and winter with quite wet soils. So that's the other thing, and pretty full reservoirs. So it's looking like potentially we may be worrying more about flooding than drought. But again, it's pretty early in the season. We'll know within the next month or so.
Yeah, well, as a utility, we really want to be able to provide as much advance warning to customers as possible that we're going to have to enter stage 2 or stage 3 of restrictions. But we find it's just impossible to know from month to month in some cases. So that's literally what we do as staff, is we have meetings monthly, if not weekly, if we're in a more critical situation, trying to assess our situation.
And a little note here from Tina Neal with the provinces. The River Forecast Center will release their April snow bulletin likely later today. So stay tuned on that one.
We'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, we'll be watching for it.
Okay, great. A question from John is, are there plans to make the regional drought levels consistent with the provincial levels?
Not at this point, because the local water supply situation is quite varied, even geographically throughout the valley, right? Like just because Greater Vernon Water is at stage 1, other water suppliers might be at stage 2 or stage 3. Like we really need to rely on those local drought management plans. And it's very hard to correlate those local stages with the provincial levels directly.
Yeah, just as an example, as I mentioned, we have our decision tree, and the pieces that we use to trigger our different drought stages are different from what the provincial levels use to trigger their stages. They're more focused on protecting fisheries resource values, which are very important. But for us as a water utility, that is just one piece, our environmental flow needs responsibilities, in addition to many other demands. And in 2015, for example, for Greater Vernon Water, we went to stage 1 based on our drought management plan, but our neighbor to the north, Armstrong, were in a much more stringent situation because they have a very different water supply, and they actually went to, I believe, only 1 day a week watering allowance, and that wasn't even their stage 4 levels. So it's just, there's very different requirements from utility to utility.
But that said, we definitely at the OBWB want to maintain communication with the province and be aware of their drought plans and how they relate to the valley, and make sure that we are keeping those in mind when we are preparing our local drought management plans, because they all need to fit together.
Great, thanks very much. Well, I think we've gotten to all the questions here. So thanks everyone for if you asked a question, and to our speakers for responding to those. Very interesting topic, and I'm sure if anything, 2015 brought home the fact that it's not just places like the Okanagan that need to deal with drought, and certainly many places on the coast were in a much more severe situation than the Okanagan that year. So I think many of the practices and lessons learned are, I'm sure other communities are watching and listening. So we really appreciate you both taking the time today to share your presentation. There will be a recording of this presentation available in a few days. You can go to our website and find it there. And we will also let you know when it's available. If you have any questions, you're also welcome to follow up with myself, with Jim Vanderwall, or my colleague Elena Chia. I'll just put our contact information up here for one moment before we end the webinar. Yeah, well, thanks very much, Kelly and Jennifer. Appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.